Hi, and welcome to Shhh the Talk Show. Did you know that when you watch the ads that pre-roll in completion before the episode, it helps us generate funding for our show? If you like what we do and you'd like to support us, please subscribe and share the channel with everyone you know. You can also continue learning about the subjects that we discuss by reading our column in the Sunday morning newspaper. So today I want to talk about the Sri Lankan elephant, and not just any old elephant, but the elephants in captivity.
Look at where we are today. Who has done it? Who has made the change that we want, for wildlife and conservation and animals? Nobody.
I think there have been videos anyway that have circulated widely, virally, being beaten, that the tails are pulled and people are just like hammering. And
human-elephant conflict is a politician-created political problem.
Yes, for our pleasure, for our needs, for our desires. It's all about us.
Elephants are the only species that are not just disappearing into the wilderness and backing off as we advance. They are pushing back.
So when we say talk about taboos, we have lots of taboos in this country. This country is like steeped in taboos, and a lot of our social issues come from these stigmas and what this word called culture, right? And culture is a good thing. I'm not saying culture is a bad thing at all. I mean, we are unique, we have our traditions, this is our identity, and there's a lot to be proud of when it comes to our Sri Lankan culture. But what exactly is culture, right? Culture is something that is created by society and man that over the years evolves in any country. We have certain cultures that, as much as culture is good, we have certain cultures that are, I feel personally, are completely outdated. And I wanted to use this platform today to talk about a particular culture of cruelty that I see as cruelty in this country, and that is the culture of captivity when it comes to wildlife. I'd really like to thank our location sponsor today. We are here at the Commons, which is probably one of Colombo's favorite hangouts, a cafe and restaurant that has some amazing food, something for everyone, and it's a really nice place to sit and have a chat and chill out. So thank you to the Commons for letting us do this show here today. So today I want to talk about the Sri Lankan elephant, and not just any old elephant, but the elephants in captivity. The guys in the shackles and the chains, and the guys who are going through so much of trauma and torture in the name of culture. And to have this conversation, I am really, really privileged and honored to have Otara and Rukshan, who have joined me, and they're both, I mean, there's no need for introduction, but they're both so vocal about this cause and about this issue in the country, and I thought this is the right time to talk about it, because as we progress as a nation, it's time for us also as people to think twice about what are we doing in the name of culture, what are we teaching our children as what is glorious and good about Sri Lanka.
It's something we're all born with, to care. We're all born on this earth to live in harmony and to have equal respect and rights for all sentient beings in our country and in our world. But as humans and as things go on, cultures and various theories and ideas and money, in many cases, mostly for a lot of profit, makes changes happen for the poor, innocent animals that can't speak. So some of these things that happen to humans, we can of course, scream about and shout about and try and we have a voice to change things or to protest or say what's wrong or right, but the animals don't. So they are the regular victims of various forms of torture and victimization, and where they're just taken away and all their rights are removed and they're put in cages. And I've always seen that. I wouldn't say always, because I was also someone who worked in the zoo with Rukshan.
I all worked together.
When we were 17, 18, 19, we spent a few years in the zoo.
I knew you had, but I didn't know that you had worked together.
So we have we go way, way back. And when I did that as well, I loved what I was doing because I loved animals and I loved to play with the lions and the leopards and the tigers and even the elephants they had. And I never realized at that age what a life they had in these cages, because I was brought up reading fairy tales on the fun life of animals in zoos and the fun life the animals have in circuses. And so from a very young age, we are brainwashed into a certain way of thinking, which is not always right. And I never saw what was wrong with it, like even though I was there and I would see the animals in concrete cages and living there 24 hours a day, I just thought I was doing a great job, and I was,
I think all of us have, even me, like the sensitization that I have had towards animals in captivity has come very, very late in life.
Yeah.
Because as you say, I mean, as school children, we are taken to the zoo, right?
Yeah,
it's this
exactly.
glamorized place.
Yeah.
The place for fun and family,
fun.
and
it's all fun
these are good
us,
memories that we create.
Then I used to even have my birthday parties there sometimes, and I'm cutting cakes and we're all laughing, and these poor animals are suffering around me, like their whole life. But it's something you don't realize, and at some point, like an awakening happens in each one of us at different times. Sometimes it never happens, and then you realize like what you've been a part of and what you've not seen and you have not been able to empathize with the animal. And that's kind of when the change happens. And
you had a special relationship with an elephant at the zoo.
Yeah, right? Indeed. And she's still there 45 years later. She's still in chains. I mean, she moves around a little bit and she can lie in the water hole a bit and all that. But I've been able to travel everywhere, lead my life for 45 years. She's been there, and it's just so unfair. So that people can pay and go and see them and get entertained and what we call educated. How can you be educated by seeing animals who are trapped in these cages, trapped in chains, stabbed with bull hooks, and they're dominated, they're fear dominated to do what we want them to do, and that's their whole life. They're taken away from their families. They don't have freedom. They have to do what humans say. They don't do it because they enjoy doing it or they want to do it. They do it out of fear. And because we have taken them away and we have broken their spirits. The only way you can make an elephant do what you want them to do is by breaking their spirit. And that is, you would make them live in fear of the pain they get for if they don't do what you tell them to do.
Yeah, so the breaking the spirit is also something that I kind of learned very late in life. I don't think we educate anybody on the process of what we call crushing an elephant, right? The crushing thing is was such a huge shock to me, because you always, I mean, you don't even think about those things. You're so used to seeing them in the Perahara, this wonderful, grandiose spectacle and the spiritual significance of the animal. And of course, everybody teaches you that this is culture, this is tradition, this is this, that. Rukshan, when it comes to this argument between spirituality, tradition versus the conservation argument of elephants being a keystone species, we should not be doing this. What is the right way to think about it?
Well, the simplest way to understand this is the elephant is a wild animal, regardless of where we have kept them as domesticated, whether we use them in pageants, peraharas, whatever.
Or even circus or whatever.
Or circus.
Yeah.
They've been traditionally taken from the wild and then, as you said, crushed or gone through a process of where they break the spirit of this animal. They make the animal believe that this puny human or the puny humans who are in charge of it are more powerful and far stronger than they really are. And that is basically the process which humans use to make a very strong, powerful wild animal. Actually the largest land mammal on earth, submit to human commands and human almost kind of our whims and fancies. And since it is a wild animal, the case is really strong that we leave these wild animals alone. And just because our culture tells us that we have always domesticated elephants, not always, maybe 2,000 years, maybe more than 2,000 years, taken them from the wild and taken them into captivity.
For the benefit of the viewers who are watching this show, simply because I learned this very late, again, only because I got involved in various conservation efforts and, you know, learning about the elephant welfare, but we never hear about the process of crushing, how this elephant ends up in a perahara from the wild. Do you know what that process is? Because I've heard of what it is, I've read about it, and I think people need to know.
We are all, you know, Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos probably, are all, and India, are all traditionally elephant-keeping countries. And all these countries have slightly different techniques of crushing or breaking the spirit of a wild elephant once they get the animal into captivity. And generally they capture young animals, and the techniques they use to capture young animals is also, it varies from country to country. But culturally, all these countries also have had ancient ties. So I think there's a lot of shared information. And the method they use in Thailand, where they box the animal into a small kind of like a fence enclosure, and then almost literally crush the animal, its ability to move is restricted. And when it's in that state, where it's tied and it's tethered and restricted, they beat the animal, they do all kinds of things.
Starve it as well, right?
Starve it. Yeah.
What I heard is that they
kind
don't
of
give it
starve.
water, they give it a lot of salt, and it's
I'm not sure,
thirsty, so that's what I heard or read
So
also.
Yeah, there are different methods, I think.
There's sensory deprivation, if you want to put it into
Yeah.
a technical term, and there's also sensitization to the human touch, which initially, if you want to use kind of modern parlance, it freaks the animal out, because here is a wild animal that has never been touched by a human, and they don't even get close to humans given a choice in the wild. And when they have no choice but to tolerate the touch and the near presence of a human, it must be extremely frightening, traumatic, agitating. But since they are restricted, since they can't do anything about it, since they can't strike back or get away, they have to put up with it. And so gradually, by sensory deprivation, by sensitization to the human voice and touch, by actually continuing to do it where the animal has no choice but to tolerate it and then get used to it and then put up with it and live with it. And that is basically the process. So sensory deprivation could mean many things, like you said, you know, not giving it water, giving it salt, making it thirsty.
Making it hungry. Then I've heard that they poke fire at it so that it
so there's a
desensitizes
carrot
to
and
fire.
stick approach also going on. You know, if the animal behaves in a certain way and there's conformity to what the humans want it to do, then there is some reward. If it rebels against it and behaves in a different way, then there is punishment. And punishments can be really brutal and cruel.
With an animal that large, I think there have been videos anyway that have circulated widely, virally, of at the temple itself, at the Kandy Dalada Maligawa, at the back, being beaten, that the tails are pulled and people are just like hammering. And I think the Bellanvilla temple also, there have been so many videos that have been circulated.
Here is an animal that walks through the wilderness of Sri Lanka or anywhere it lives without fearing anything, without having concern about anything. And even at a young age, it's got the close protection of its parents, its family, its mother and her sisters.
The herd.
The matriarchal herds. And these are powerful animals with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of intelligence, will do almost anything to prevent any harm coming to the baby. And these are the babies, when they are a few years old, that are practically kidnapped from the wild, brutally captured and removed from their families and taken into captivity. But in Sri Lanka, it's a lot worse now because it's illegal to capture elephants.
But it still happens. That's what
happens.
boggles my mind, is the fact that yes, we have this wildlife ordinance and this Flora and Fauna Act and all of that, and we supposedly have a Department of Wildlife that is protecting these animals, but still, I mean, it's almost like with complete immunity or impunity, you find political VIPs who are donating baby elephants, abducted baby elephants, to temples as a bare, or how does that even happen? I mean, the fact that, okay, it's illegal on the one hand, but then you have the center of Buddhism accepting donated, abducted wildlife calves, elephant calves, who obviously they were not just gently, taken out of the forest away from their mother. They've been put through so much trauma, and they've been brought, and in the name of tradition or in the name of some sort of astrological,
religion,
for luck or whatever it is, I don't know. Yeah. So every time, for instance, if I put up something on social media about elephants, and sometimes I'm sharing information about this is what elephants are going through, this is abduction, I am not in favor, I'm going to put it out there, I have no shame in saying I'm completely not in favor of this gala presentation of 100 and odd something elephants at the Peraharas and all, just to say, oh, this is Sri Lanka, come and watch the show. But then you always get this backlash from people saying Buddhagamata apahasa karanna epa by criticizing elephant. It's not Buddhagama. And then you also get the school of thought that says this is culture, this is tradition, this has always happened, what's the big deal? But my thing is, okay, fine, we had elephants in the times of the kings, right? Because we didn't have the vehicles and the jeeps and the bicycles, right? The kings would go in the elephants. The Buddha's tooth relic, the whole point of it, as far as I understand, was that it has to be taken in the highest position in the Perahara, and the elephant gives the height, and the elephant's spirit is apparently the purest and the most spiritually apt and deserving, worthy of carrying the tooth relic. Now that is the beliefs from the past. But then when they took elephants in these parades in the past, we didn't have light bulbs that we wrapped the elephant up in back then, right? The kind of the clothing, the garments that they wear and all that now is completely different, and I think a lot more cruel and traumatic for an animal. We didn't, I believe, as far as I read, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that even these religious Peraharas in the past, when in the times of the kings, were very short. They didn't have tar roads, and it was the normal earth that the animal is used to walking on anyway. Yes, there was a training process, but even the mahouts, the way they built relationships with the animals, there was a human animal, a much stronger, a bond, and these Peraharas were very short, didn't go on for hours at end, didn't have the kind of the noise and the spectacle that we have today, didn't have the kind of crowds that we have coming and aping, and didn't have the going under the stomach of the sadhu and taking babies under the stomach of the elephant. So I think this is not our cultural tradition.
No.
These are all these commercialized shows.
There was something in our cultures, in India, Sri Lanka, especially Sri Lanka, that the elephant was indispensable for. That is, as a earth-moving machine, if you would have, as an animal that could drag large loads either out of forests, the timber that is felled, large trees in a rainforest environment. There was nothing that could get those trees out of those forests for human use other than an animal like an elephant. So they were the bulldozers, the earth movers, the heavy machinery of the ancient world. And now
you don't need that. We don't need that.
We don't require that. Elephants were used in pageants because elephants were anyway available for use in so many other things. It was a animal that was used to build the very cities and the civilization that this country today proudly looks back to the past. But now they don't need to do that work for humans anymore. So increasingly, some people feel that we need to continue with this tradition of captive elephants.
And not just the 1 or 2 captive elephants that you used to have. Now it's over 100. Like the temples are trying to boast about who has more elephants in the Perahera. There are news articles. I think some time ago there was a monk who actually rode an elephant on the street with the elephant holding a sign saying we need more elephants in the Perahera. That was like, I found that hugely ironic.
They shouldn't be riding elephants anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, these monks don't know their practice. They're just talking about precept. But cruelty is cruelty. And the Buddha was the most compassionate human being of all time when it came to how he related to animals and how he wanted humans to view animals. And there are places in the scripture he has said to the monks, unimaginable monks is the suffering of animals. So basically he wanted humans to become cognizant of the suffering of animals. So for humans not to think that they know what animals are going through. What's terrible about captivity of elephants is that there is no attempt by elephant owners and elephant owning temples to start a breeding program. And there are very many reasons for that, all not good reasons at all. So if they really want some kind of elephant population to be available for Peraharas, then they should have got serious about breeding. Because
breeding in captivity so that the calves don't go through the trauma of being separated from wild earth.
Not that it makes it any better, but the thing is also, like I think in Pinnavala as well, the elephants are not breeding, and I think they're not breeding because of the trauma and the stress that they're under, and I don't think they want to breed. I mean, I sometimes think that they have this sort of inner sense to actually block their breeding and not let any more elephants go through what they are going through, you know. I mean,
I'd like to talk about that because I think we don't think about the psychology of elephants.
And they're such intelligent animals, and they have so much intuition and so much knowledge, and I mean, really, they are one of the most intelligent, beautiful animals that you can ever find. And they're so sensitive, and you know, all you have to do is just even watch a herd for a while. You know, you'll see how they all protect their babies. You know, all the aunts, the mothers, they're all, you know, all the siblings. You know how they protect the babies. I mean, that's pure love, right? And then you're just, you know, going in there and just traumatizing them and removing this, you know, this little babe, this jewel of their lives. You know, the baby. And I mean, those are things that I don't know. We have got so disconnected to understanding the pain and the suffering of another being, just for our pleasure, for our need, for our desires. It's all about us. We want, we need. We want more money. We want the look. We want the glory. We want the you know, and it's just we don't care about their suffering, and it's at, you know, at some point, you know, you have to start changing that to actually care, to actually live a life individually.
The signs of stress that we see from elephants in captivity, whether it's at the zoo, whether it's at Pinnavala, whether it's in the Perahera, whether it's at these hotels that are commercializing these fellows for weddings and, you know, photo ops and all that. Some people don't understand some of the symptoms, the stress signs, right?
The swinging, that is. I
mean,
they
say Alia Natana.
They're comforting themselves. I mean, if you see even in zoos and in other animals in captivity, you know, they keep swaying. Like if you go to the zoo, you see the bear in the zoo and the tigers. They just go pacing back, and because you go crazy, right? I mean, you just put yourself in that situation. We had 3 months in lockdown recently, so we have an idea now, somewhat. This is their life, and in this, you know, in this enclosure, what to do? You go crazy. I mean, right? You're not there by choice. You haven't done any wrong. You're not, you're not a thief or a murderer or someone to go to jail and to get your punishment. And you know, it's for animals who are wild animals that need the space need, the forest need large areas, even if they are captive. You need large sanctuaries where they can walk and have the space to interact with other animals, to do have their normal behavior patterns and their normal sort of environment that they're used to in the wild. And that's why they go crazy, and the elephants swear because they're trying to comfort themselves because they've gone crazy.
It's like people.
Inside.
I mean, even when we go
Yeah,
psycho, I mean,
rocking,
this rocking
exactly.
back and forth.
Because that's how you comfort
I think that's a
yourself.
misconception, because a lot of people seem to think Aliya Natanawa, and they teach their children also Shasha the Balanda Aliya Natanawa.
It's the same for even elephants that are in circuses or other wild animals in circuses. They go through absolute torture to be able to perform, to be able to do what we want them to do, to jump through rings, to pick up certain things. And this elephant painting as well, people think is just so amazing. They don't paint in the wild. They have been, taught to do that through certain methods. And it's not something they would do naturally. So it's not, there's a reason why they do it.
Like elephant soccer and elephant polo. Nonsense,
By sitting on a stool at the Dehiwala Zoo?
Yeah.
Sitting on their heads?
Sitting on their heads.
Glad you brought that up, because what happens behind the scenes before they are able to or willing to sit on their heads or sit on a tiny stool is a lot of beatings and jabbings from the bull hook or the anchors. And since I worked in the zoo in my early years after school, I actually saw what happens. And baby elephants are also treated really badly and roughly just because they're cute babies and they have an instinct to play. And when you actually see them in public, they're trying to interact with small children because they have that kind of carefree, joyous nature still. And it's very difficult to get that out of a baby elephant. But still, that baby knows that if it deviates from what it's supposed to do and follow the adults in holding the tail or whatever it is and do all those tricks, then there is a beating in store. And the mahouts will be very careful about doing that in public, but occasionally they slip up and you see them bivouac.
And a lot of this stuff is also, it's done hidden, right? That's why you don't see much of the crushing, because it's all hidden.
Yeah, because there is like, I mean, there are responses that you get when you talk about crushing. They say, no, that's not the way it happens in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, exactly.
And they very confidently talk about these mantras and all that that they chant and the elephant listens.
What nonsense. I mean, they can't chant. An elephant that has been rested, basically abducted from the wild, from its family, and then held by humans in captivity is not going to listen to any chants or anything soothing. And I want to clarify one thing. I said, I don't believe we should have captive elephants at all. I don't think we should even have elephants in peraharas, because I think we've come to a stage in our evolution as people, progress as a nation or in this world, that we understand too much to ignore the fact that the basis for all this is cruelty and the denial of the rights of a sentient animal that really should live in a family situation in the wild like we do. And my viewpoint to view wildlife or any other animal is always, would I like that happening to me? If I was kidnapped when I was a kid from my parents and my family, and in the midst of, actually being out there somewhere, maybe at a picnic or something, and taken away and kept in like a solitary situation, solitary confinement, and beaten and made to comply with certain behaviors, and never actually to see my family again, what would my thought process be? What would my mood be? What would my spirit be? What would I think about my captors? And what would I dream of and want to do? I would dream of getting free, getting away from my chains and my captivity, and one day I'll have a dream of being back with my family. It's exactly like that for them. And I can't say that about all animals, because different animals have different levels of
sensitivity,
Tolerance.
intelligence, sentiency, but elephants are much like us. And if we can't see that and we can't appreciate that and we still ignore that because of our greed and other reasons, you know, I mean, the Perahara really is a money-making machine. It may have some very noble ideals, and maybe we want to respect the tooth relic of the Buddha, but there's a layer cake of other things going on. There is Ananda Sagara Hamduro who says that elephants were a way of getting more interest in the public towards peraharas or pageants that were religious, that either had to do with the tooth relic or maybe some other religious event. A way almost like a circus act. You put elephants into the pageant, then you will get more spectators and more people coming. At the end of the day, more money can be made by the temple or whatever.
Or the tourist board.
Or now the tourist board. No.
Yeah.
So go to the beginning. Why they introduced elephants is because the public's interest in these Buddhist or religious pageants was waning. And to be able to kind of smell, touch, feel their presence, and hear their sounds and rumblings, I think it's a tremendous attraction to humans, and especially to younger people. But unfortunately, there's so much brainwashing that goes on to tell you this is right, this is acceptable, this is good and nice, and this is something wonderful. But it's actually terrible. It's the whole basis of the operation is cruelty and insensitivity to a sentient being.
Okay. Even if they say, okay, for instance, if they claim that no, we don't use cruelty to train elephants, right? And even if you wanted to believe that, I don't, but it's up to each and every person to make up their own informed decision about that. If we say in Sri Lanka, we are not cruel in training.
I'm eyewitness to it.
Thank you for saying that. I have witnessed it myself. But say it's our word against theirs, right? There is so much of cruelty that we see in front of us in these, not only the peraharas, but at Pinavela or at the zoo or whatever, that we, again, kind of we're blind to it. One is the way the elephant is dressed in a parade, right? The fact that it's sort of, forget the chains is an obvious thing. All these captive elephants are in chains, and when you're in chains, your back legs are together, your front legs are together, the movement is restricted, and this is a large animal that walks like miles, right? So that's your first sign. Then you have that anchors, that hook that keeps going in, and the ear is the most sensitive part of an elephant. And it's not just the anchors, it's even the fact that those clothing, it covers the ear, right? The cloth and all that.
Which they need for.
And they need the ears for ventilation, for their body.
Dissipate heat.
For heat.
Yeah. So that there.
Cool
Then you
the body.
have the eyes being shut off. There are these little slits in the cloth. So then its sight is restricted. So those things are cruelty.
Fire around
the fire, the noise, people
on coal.
Burning, coconut shells that are indoors.
Sometimes,
Things that
and we've seen now that we have the age of the internet, and thank God for social media, we've seen what happens, right? These elephants run amok in peraharas. And you're endangering human lives then. I think now schools have also started taking them on cycle parades. There are a couple of schools that have started doing that as well.
Yeah, but every time an elephant runs amok in a perahara, especially in Sri Lanka and sometimes in India, I mean, not that it happens in both places, but here especially, they cover everything up as much as possible. I mean, now the media is everywhere, so these things get filmed, and then at least in social media it's carried, but in the regular press, these things are downplayed and minimized because they want to keep this thing going. So they want to keep the pretense that the perahara is fine and safe and wonderful, and if an animal is seen suffering, or if an animal breaks free of its chains or something and chases behind people and kills people, that's the last thing the state wants becoming public information, because they protect this perahara like this is the only way to do this perahara. All I'm saying is they have to look at a time when the perahara has no more elephants. I think everybody who is right thinking will be happy, and certainly the elephants will be happier. So if there's a breeding program that is, you know, successful, then for a while those elephants can be part of the perahara, and also everything can be looked at systematically and see that cruelty is minimized. The right kind of mahout is in charge of elephants. The proper science is applied. The crushing process no longer need happen in that way, and especially if it's a captive-born elephant, there's a lot less to do to make that elephant conform to human requirements, because that elephant is born into a situation where he or she doesn't know of the wilderness, know of a time of running around, freedom. So, and also it's got parents who are already domesticates, are used to complying. So the communication from the parents and the artificial family that the elephant has to the young one will be,
this is the way, you just follow
instructions.
Yeah.
Best for you. That is not ideal, but that is the better of the two, the lesser of two evils.
If other countries around the world are learning and evolving and progressing, and they're shutting down their cruel forms of commercialized trade and all that, why do we keep saying Sri Lanka needs this?
Because
now, just to play devil's advocate, okay, just to play devil's advocate, because you said there's no need for captivity and all of that. There, I want to just throw out this argument of the fact that land is reducing. The real fact that our human population is growing. We have a government that is investing heavily on land development. We even have cases going on now that they're trying to change laws to be able to encroach on forest reserves to try and start, you know, developing on that. So then you're also then taking away the habitat of wildlife, especially elephants who need these large areas to roam. So you have a population of elephants that is losing its habitat. Then that obviously gives way to an increase in the human-elephant conflict, because these guys don't have their forests, don't have their homes, so they're going to encroach into villages and cause problems. So then there's this school of thought or this argument that comes back. So then what do you do with the elephants? Because you're taking away their habitat. Therefore, they must have a place to stay. Therefore, suddenly the argument for captivity, you know, that the private elephant owners come riding with their savior flags.
That's like you're trying to stop one problem by just creating another,
but they
without
say, you know,
solving the other one.
That's what you can do.
It's a kind
you
of
know,
self-serving argument,
it is. But
for elephants.
they say, okay, now practically and pragmatically, to reduce the human-elephant conflict, you have to take the elephants out of the story.
I wouldn't really pay too much. I mean, as a nation, I tell anybody who has a mind to think not to pay too much attention to what captive elephant organizations talk about wild elephants. Because these are the people who have created the demand, and they have no right to talk about the welfare of wild animals and how they should and shouldn't be living in the wild, and whether there are, you know, whether there is an excess or surplus or whatever the way they look at it, and what to do with that. Because
sorry, but in that case there'll be surplus and excess of other animals. So then what do we do with those? Then what about the leopards and the bear and the what do we do with
They can just die off because they have no real use for it. But the elephant owners organizations need the elephants. So they will create a crisis in the field, in the wilderness areas, which then can be pointed out or cited as overpopulation of elephants in an island that cannot now contain the wild population. So the best way to deal with this is not for farmers to end up killing them or whatever, and
they're safer in captivity.
Just take them into captivity. That's the least cruel thing to do.
Yeah.
But in fact,
and this is the kind of messaging that is being sold and promoted by the Minister of Wildlife himself.
There is a saying that when the newborn lamb cries, the wolf that comes running does not come to assist it. So our Minister of Wildlife is kind of like that wolf. So his concern about wildlife and the crisis wildlife face is that kind of exploitative interest. This is a man who has been put into this ministry. He is what I call an environmental hitman. He's there to dismantle things, to make the laws more pliable, more flexible, and also enable the destruction and the exploitation of what is today wilderness for tomorrow to be commercially useful or exploited. But none of these, I mean, this country has an identity crisis in having all this wildlife. We are in the 21st century. We are into, we are 20 years into the 21st century. And even now we have X number of elephants, maybe 4,000 to 7,000 elephants in the wild. Unknown number of leopards, maybe up to 1,000. Bears, unknown because we are not doing baseline studies for them. And all these animals, these are iconic animals that people from far and wide come to see in the wilderness in Sri Lanka. But are we good custodians? We are not. But are we good marketers? Yeah, we try to market them in any which way. It's like packaging something that is kind of immorally and unethically obtained in beautiful wrapping paper, and the tourist board and all other, big corporates that are involved in wildlife tourism, and the wildlife department, which is complicit in wildlife crime. I'm saying it openly, and this can be challenged, and I can certainly start proving certain things, and I take the opportunity, and I would enjoy people trying to cross swords with me about this, because for 20 years I have seen how the wildlife department is involved with wildlife crime that they are tasked with trying to stop. So before it really seriously becomes internationalized, and then the control of preventing or reducing or kind of containing this goes out of our hands, we need to talk about these things.
Just to talk about the marketing of Sri Lanka, which we do, right? And I know that some time ago there was conversation with the PATA that this captive elephant thing and the commercialization of elephants was going to be phased out. I don't see that happening though, because I still see Sri Lanka being sold in a way where it's the elephant rides that are sort of a big, a big draw, the tourists, and I've seen them sort of encouraging travel influencers to put up photographs and videos of their elephant ride experiences, to talk about the glory of the nice stuff to do in Sri Lanka, that whole adventure. What do you have to say about that?
Well, the thing is, yes, it does happen, and they don't see that side of it. I mean, that's why it really has to come from the top, where this is our priority. Like here, we sort of, market this poor. I mean, we are marketing wildlife. We do very little to protect it, very little to expand the forest, very little to protect our wildlife, and then we market this whole elephant rides and things. And a lot of hotels and a lot of companies have now kind of stopped marketing or having photos of things,
but
because
they still
of
offer
public.
it.
Yeah, but because of public pressure, and they have had so much pressure from by having offering for weddings and things. When in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, there's been so much pressure from the public.
Okay.
So
which is good.
It stopped, but none of them having such a big platform, such a big opportunity to be able to change this. None of them will step out and say to stop it.
You're talking about corporate.
Yeah. None of them.
But Otara, what about this thing of where they justify saying when the private elephant owners back then, you used elephants for logging and work to be able to afford to maintain the animal, right? But now those no longer happen. So therefore, the only way someone can make the money they need to manage and feed and maintain a domesticated animal is to rent it out to the hotels, or use it for commercial purposes. And then they're saying, otherwise, how are you going to take care of the animal?
Yeah, but then there are other ways you can do it. You can let the animal be free and let people come and and pay and see them. You know, obviously those domestic animals can't go back in the wild, but you can have an environment where they're, you know, where they're free, or, you know, or some other option where the animals are off their chains. I mean, I have witnessed in Nepal, I visited, where they made all the elephants chain free, most. There was one place that, I can't remember the name now, but one group, one sort of tourist, they have hotels, and you know, they had also they were captive elephant owners from the past, and they decided like no more elephant rides and no more, and they made the elephants chain free. They lived off chains, and there was a process of converting that, and to convert and to train the mahouts and to convert them also to handling the elephants without fear dominance, so they didn't have bull hooks, and you know, we went on walks with the elephants and they were bathing, and so they don't let you touch them, they don't let you go near them. And they're not sort of dominated with the bull hook. There's another method that they use. Nice. So you can do changes like that. You know, it is possible if you have the will. It is possible to do it. So you don't, you know, go on the same old cruel method of, you know, doing that. And recently, I saw it like last week also. One organization that has elephants. Now, obviously, because of this current situation, they're under pressure. You know, earlier they would have obviously made a lot of money from all the tourists coming. Now they're under pressure, must be, because of the number they have, and you know, there are obviously no tourists. So they're offering like packages, like if you pay so much, you can get 3 baths for free, or 3 washes for free, or 3 walks for free. Yes, yeah. With the elephants, or you know, like
and
sort
this
of
bathing thing. You were talking to me some time ago. Like even in Pinnavela, we have this thing where everybody comes to photograph the bathing, elephant bathing and all that. That's also
so, I mean,
a bit of a sham, right?
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the time, even that bathing, they're forced to be there, right? And they have to stay in the water if they like it or not.
They're chained.
And they're chained. Most of them are chained in the
and
water.
they're standing on rocks and stuff.
And a lot of the place is shallow. There's like it's like rocks. So not all elephants can. If you see in Pinnavela, they don't. In a lot of places they don't lie down, because of the I think the rocks that are there, and usually they sometimes let them cross to the other side, and then you see them rolling, and you know. But normally in the wild, when you see elephants in the water, they're swimming and they're bathing.
This role that the elephant plays as a keystone species, why does the elephant need to stay in the wild? Which beyond just the compassionate argument.
Okay, so just a quick definition of what a keystone is, or a keystone species. A keystone is the stone that supports all the stones that make up an arch, and the way that the arch is a self-supporting structure, and the keystone keeps all the other stones in place.
Because of the pressure, it's holding everything in place.
Exactly. It balances the pressures on the other stones, and the keystone holds it together. So the keystone is at the apex of the arch, and if you pull out the keystone, everything collapses. So the elephant is a keystone species. If you pull the elephant out of the wilderness, everything else will suffer, and there will be a domino effect, there will be collapse. Just because we don't see it, luckily in most parts of the world that elephants still live in, or have traditionally lived in, there are still numbers living. And unless you have countries, you have to go to, I think, the small countries in Africa like Burundi, and there are 2 or 3 East or Central African countries that had lots of elephants at one time and have no elephants now. You have to look at what's happening there in the wilderness to actually visually understand and study what happens. So, but likewise, if our elephant goes from our wilderness, there will be a knock-on effect on all other species.
So now this is going to get personal, right? Now what happens, this whole thing of, we talk about animal welfare, we're talking about compassion, we're talking about the dangers of a cruel culture, and why we are kind of raising children to accept cruelty as our tradition and all. Then what happens is, මේ Otara ta එහෙම කියන්න ලේසි, Rukshan ta කියන්න ලේසි, Colombo හතේනේ, Colombo මිනිස්සුනේ, you know, this whole Western thinking, NGO, that's the big thing is when you criticize the Perahera.
I don't know what this NGO is.
NGO
none of us have seen any site of any NGO.
Yeah, but they say, no, it's very easy when you're from Colombo, when you're from privilege, when you have the money, when you have the this, when you have the that. That it's easy for us to get upset about these things and be woke. that it's not reality, or that we don't understand or appreciate the cultural values of Sri Lanka. So do you have any thoughts on that?
It's not really about where you're from or where. I'm not from Colombo 7, by the way.
Yeah, but you know what the mentality is, right? The minute you talk about this stuff.
But yeah, you know, it's not about where you're from or who you are or what you do. It's about just being human, right? I mean, all of us need to start understanding humanity, and humanity doesn't mean it's just looking after humans. Being human, and for me, humanity is protecting your environment and being kind to all animals and living together with other sentient beings, because I honestly believe in our country that we can do it. Our forests can thrive, our wildlife can thrive, our people can thrive, we can be a wealthy nation. Why are we still struggling? Because we are going against the system of Sri Lanka, where we have to protect those areas, and we have to live together with that life, because we are an island, we are all one, and we are all interconnected. I mean, we can't take just the humans out of this and try to, you know, adjust things and put, you know, to be like Singapore, and this famous thing, we want to be like Singapore. Why do you want to be like that? I mean, it's fine, so let Singapore be like Singapore, and, you know, well done Singapore, but when we have all what we have, what is this great push to be like Singapore?
Human-elephant conflict is a politician-created political problem. It needs a political solution. It needs political will for a solution. It doesn't need all this garbage that politicians and governments put out all the time to con the people, saying that human-elephant conflict is maintained because there's pressure from NGOs. I mean, I have been part of half a dozen NGOs over time. Right now, I'm still affiliated to or on the boards of or on the committees of some. These NGOs are locally based. These are not the NGOs that the government likes to point and say, oh, NGO Karyo, this and that. The people who made money off this land during a war or help the enemy or whatever. So they'd love to put us into that category. We don't raise money abroad. We are not living off this stuff. I have never got paid a cent for going for a single meeting or going into the field for something or any of the work I've done. It's 100% voluntary, and I don't expect everybody else to do voluntary work, because maybe they need to earn a living or make pots of money for God knows what. Because at the end of the day, your country you need to do something for in whatever capacities you have. So this NGO kind of
whitewashing, NGO washing.
Yeah, NGO washing doesn't stick to me. I don't care what anybody says.
Sri Lanka established the world's first wildlife sanctuary,
exactly.
right, in Mihintali. And you actually created an entire campaign around that, trying to educate people. If this is a land that created the world's first wildlife sanctuary,
beings will live free, and that the kings are nothing but the guardians.
We were the world's first island to demonstrate compassion between man and animal, and how far back we've gone from that.
And conservation.
That is conservation. You know, if you live and let live, and you live off the land or on the land without harming other creatures that also depend on the land for their existence, then that is conservation. Below the surface, below the official facade, the government supports the illegal wildlife trade. There is no two words about it. I mean, have all governments done it? To a greater or lesser extent? Yes. All governments, all parties of whatever color. That's the whole problem here.
Somehow this is this big taboo, and that's why we're talking about it too, because people just don't want to either accept it or say it out loud.
And, you know, it's not about the government or the party or the president. It's about what's happening, and we should just remove ourselves from all of that and just care for the country as just individuals, you know. And we shouldn't get taken up with this great fight for one or the other, or, you know, because really overall, look at where we are today. Who has done it? Who has made the change that we want, you know, for wildlife and conservation and animals? Nobody. And then we just fight with each other, and everybody gets angry with each other over, you know, whatever a so-called political faith or interest. And it's not about
And
it's not
ultimately, who
about,
is suffering?
yeah, exactly.
The
And
wildlife.
we really need to start removing ourselves from that. And it's not about judging one government or another or whatever, but we just need to remove ourselves from all those sort of things that that distract us from the truth and the reality of what's happening and what's not happening. And for me, it will never ever work if we just focus on the people and we just focus on development without focusing on conservation of our wildlife, of our animals, better animal welfare, because we are building a cruel society. And when you have people who are disconnected
Apathetic.
from the suffering of a being who you basically have a cruel heart, and that is, it's not just for the animals, it affects the whole society. The way you treat people, the way you act, the way you communicate, the way you the way you basically build the society, and you build the nation on that platform.
You asked me how it's easy for people in Colombo 7 and Colombo, and it's difficult for people out there, especially who have to coexist or are conflicting with elephants. But that whole thing is created. Politicians are putting rural people in the path of elephants, and then they are saying terrible things are happening to these people, so we have to get rid of the elephants, or we have to deal with this elephant issue. There is no elephant issue if people are allowed to understand their environment, understand who they have to share the environment with.
Which they have done for many, many years.
Exactly. So Purana villages always could coexist with elephants. But it's these settlements, and where settlements happen now. We constantly said elephant conservationists, other conservationists, other planners, anybody with a heart and a mind have said, plan these things properly, plan development properly, plan settlements properly, plan agricultural allotments properly. You don't just put them where best suits you, or that you get the most number of votes because you provided something in your electorate for your people. But how about the elephants? The elephants are the only species that are not just disappearing into the wilderness and backing off as we advance. They are pushing back. And when we kill, they kill. And I think elephants kill humans very reluctantly. Often we are putting ourselves into a situation where the elephant has little option but to kill the human. And I think a lot of rural people do understand that. This is why they have far more tolerance, and the media hypes it up. Recently there was a female elephant that had, what the journalist had said was bit on some firecrackers and damaged her mouth, and she went into a river in southern India, and she stood there and died. And then they gave her a Hindu funeral. And what was interesting is on social media there were so many comments saying, oh, terrible, terrible, how can people be so brutal? Now, this firecrackers business is because the journalists really didn't understand what it was that the elephant bit or what exploded in its mouth. It was not firecrackers, it was a hakapatas. But the same people who commented, I know some of them as well, and I pointed it out. This is a hakapatas. It's happening weekly, maybe daily, all over Sri Lanka to elephants and other animals. But I don't see this moralistic stuff about, oh my God, terrible, what kind of human beings are they? They were Indians. So I think it's easy for us to Sri Lankans to stand on some pedestal and say, oh, those Indians, cruel, cruel, terrible. We are not even looking at our issue. Our issue is really with hakapatas 10 times as big as theirs. This is just one incident that they zeroed in on. It's not prevalent in the way it is prevalent here. So whoever is putting hakapatas out there in the countryside is far more cruel and far more immoral and far less human than those Indians. So how dare we, talk about all this stuff without, solving our problem. You have to look at all this with an open mind, this whole elephant issue, and an open heart. If you can't do that, and be dead honest about it, damn honest I'd say, because if you can't look into yourself and how your own mind has been conditioned to think about this problem, and how your own cultural conditioning, your own ethnocentricity informs how you decide on these really ethical and moral issues, we'll never solve this.
parents out there question, oh, if my child is not exposed to the elephant at Pinnavela or the elephant in the zoo, that they won't learn about the elephant. It's an educational experience. And I saw this on the internet. It's not something that I came up with, but children, you ask a child about a dinosaur, he'll be able to tell you a lot more without ever having seen a dinosaur in his life.
That's true.
Right? So there is absolutely no need for a child to see an animal, a beautiful,
especially in this day and
special
age,
animal
with
in this day and
YouTube
age. There's
and
no
social
need for
media and
that
everything.
child to see that animal in chains being made to do things against its nature or characteristics, being trussed up and stressed out to learn about that animal. So, I mean, we have a little island that gives you amazing adventures and amazing opportunities to go out there and witness these animals in their natural habitat. So I personally don't feel captivity and domestication is something that we need. And I do agree with Otara and Rukshan both that there are very practical and very logical solutions to taking care of the animals that are already captive and phasing them out slowly so that we don't have to get back into this culture of cruelty. And I don't think that Sri Lanka should continue endorsing or encouraging cruelty as culture or tradition. I think we need to remove the first C word cruelty and bring in the second C word compassion into this country. And I think the only way we can do that, the politicians may be playing their own games, or whoever else, the private elephant owners and whoever else benefits from it, do what they want. They're not going to change their tune. We can't make them. But we as people, as citizens, as humans, if we start changing the way we behave, then slowly there is that ripple effect of we're bringing up a future generation that doesn't conform to these, cruel mindsets. And that is the role that we can play, not just to sit and listen to a talk show, or sit and listen to Colombo people, or sit and listen to NGO narratives, if you want to call it that. But it's about us exercising critical thinking, informing ourselves, and more importantly, talking about it.